Hi there, my name is Laura Fortune and I'm here today to do an enameling demonstration for enameling newbies. Now, if you're brand new to enameling, I hope that you'll take something away from this course to understand a little bit more about enameling. And if you're familiar with enameling, I hope that this is a bit of a refresher, or you can just see my process of how I create enamels. So now, what is enameling? Enamel is a term that is thrown around quite a bit as a material. So within jewelry, we hear enamel jewelry all the time, but it could be just resin that is hard set into a piece, and that only requires to be air dried and it hardens like resin. But the enameling that I do is in a kiln, and it requires a temperature of over 1400 degrees Fahrenheit. And it is essentially glass that is melted and fused to a metal piece. You know, usually come in this little jar, a plastic jar, and it does look a bit like a powder. It's very, very finely ground down glass, and there are other components within it. It's kind of like silver solder. The main material is silver, but there are certain components within that help it melt. So that's similar to enamel. So I use something like this where I have all of my colors that I really like to use in my work, and I have samples here so that I can use this as a color palette board. You can enamel on copper, fine silver, or gold. And because I personally only use opaque enamels, which means you cannot see the undersurface of it, you just see the color, I only enamel on copper, and that's most cost effective if you're just starting out. So today I'm going to be making an enamel pendant with you. Very simple, with a process just called sifting, which is basically just shaking the enamel onto the copper piece. I'm going to be using a chain from Halstead. It is a Rolo chain that already has a Lobster clasp on it. So it's fantastic. It's already set. It's 18 inches. And the other component that I'm going to be using is a bail that just requires that you open it and close it. So no jump ring required in this piece. So before just jumping right into how I enamel, I want to talk a bit about how you can use enamel in your jewelry and your design process. The best part about enamel is its color. There's so many options with color that it's a great way to add that element to your jewelry without just relying on stones or beads to be the colorful part if you're interested in enameling. That's also great about enameling is you choose the shape that you want, and you'll be using the copper that you cut the shape out of. So I'm going to go over how I transfer a shape design onto copper before I start enameling. I think about the size that I would really want my pendant to be. I have a 2.5 by 2 inch piece of 18 gauge copper. You're going to want to enamel on 18 gauge or 20 gauge is a good place to start for a flat piece. But you can go a bit thinner, but for right now I would stay with 18 gauge. When I was thinking about the shape and size to create a piece, I kind of think about how it's going to land on my body and what size that I want this pendant to be. So I have here it's about 2 inches by 1.25 inches. Of a little square here. And this is a good guide for me. So I can take a piece of tracing paper and I can say, okay, I want it to be a leaf or a palm or something, and it keeps me within this realm. The other important thing to note is because I'm going to be putting it on a bail, I'm going to need to drill a hole in this piece, and I want there to be a space here, at least, I usually would think like 1/8 of an inch. So this little, because you need for the enamel to be right here, so 1/8 of an inch. because if it's too thin here in the spacing, you risk that your enamel will crack off. So again, I can come here and I can create, you know, like just thinking about whatever kind of like shapes you think you might want. It could be, you know, maybe you want to be doing lettering. So really you can create anything as long as you can saw it out and pierce the pieces. For this one, I was thinking I would like to do kind of like a blob or a like paint splatter, because that's kind of the beauty of enamel. It's just this big, it's a piece of color. And so I came up with this shape right here that I'm going to do. I went through a few and this is where I'm at. So the next thing to do, the way that I transfer my pieces to copper is, this is tracing paper that I'm using here. And then vellum is a bit of a thicker type of tracing paper. And so I get a piece of vellum. It comes also in regular size sheets, but I've cut this one down. And I just take it here and I will trace the shape that I want. Same thing to remember at this point here is you really want to have about 1/8 of an inch, because you don't want the integrity of this piece, like if it gets bent, that you would have an enamel cracking right here. So you want to make sure that you keep that in mind. The other thing is you want to make sure that you know where you want to drill your hole at on your piece, just like that. Okay, the next thing that I'm going to do is I take some packing tape. It can be just cheap packing tape, nothing special. And I'm going to take a piece of it and I'm going to lay it over my drawing design. Press it down a little bit. And then when I pull it up, my drawing is on the tape. And now I can just put that right on top of my piece of copper. Whoa. Okay. So now I'm ready to go and cut this piece out. So I have my piece of 18 gauge copper here with the transferred image with the tape. And so now I just need to cut it out. I'm going to be using a 2/0 saw blade and a little burr life. Okay, so I have my piece cut here, and before I remove this tape, I just want to make sure that I want to use the center punch to mark where I want to drill my hole at. So now I can remove this tape. And now I just need to drill a hole where that punch is at. I usually have a separate surface to drill holes into. I don't want to put a bunch of holes into my bench pin. And I'm using about a 5mm drill bit. I want this hole to be big enough that the enamel doesn't fill it in, and that the pendant swings on the bail. All right, so we have our piece cut now. I just want to make sure that if there are any nicks from the sawing, you just want to sand those off a little bit. So I just have a piece of sandpaper here. And this also cleans the metal a little bit. It's important that it's clean to start out with. So here are the supplies that you need for enameling. You have your copper piece that you're going to enamel. You need a holding agent, which is going to help the enamel stay on the metal. Two options are squeegee oil and clear fire. I personally use squeegee oil because it doesn't require for me to degrease the piece. It also doesn't require for me to wait for the piece to dry before putting it into the kiln. A sifter. Choose your enamel colors. I've chosen 2 colors because what is important for enameling is that you will be enameling the back side and the front side. The back of a piece of enamel is usually called the counter enamel, which you enamel on, and you will choose that color based on if it will be seen. If it's not going to be seen, you can use like a throwaway color, like your least favorite color, or kind of a agglomeration of colors. But for this piece, I feel it could be reversible, so I'm going to choose 2 colors that I want this piece to be on the front and the back. So one question is a counter enamel necessary? Yes, absolutely it's necessary, because what you're doing is to enamel it's like sandwiching the metal between the enamel, and it kind of requires that tension on both sides. If there is no tension on this side, you risk your enamel popping off of that metal. It just weakens the integrity of the piece. So you're always going to be counter enameling. I personally counter enamel first. So in this instance, I know that both sides might be viewable, but I am going to consider that still, if it weren't, I would be counter enameling first. The other materials that you need are finding maybe your local free magazine. These are called trivets. These are the pieces that you will be balancing your piece on to put it into the kiln. One thing before you put your piece, get it enameled and ready to put in the kiln, you want to make sure that you have a trivet that you can balance your piece on. Now I know I've picked a bit of organic odd shape, so it's not as simple as just landing it on this. I find this would probably be too big. You need this piece to be super secure because you might shake a little at first. You don't want anything to fall off and you lose the work you've done to put the enamel on your piece. So for this smaller size, I found that it fits pretty much about right here. And that leaves it like pretty secure, right? So I can move it around because I want this piece to stay super flat. I don't want it to be a little angle because you risk your enamel. Enamel won't necessarily like melt off, but it definitely can, like with the weight, end up going down a little bit. But also when you're setting it, what I'll be doing is moving it from this into the kiln, and I don't want it to shake off and slip. So here, now I can see, I can move it around. One more option for enameling, especially if you're doing more of production style, is to have a piece of steel like this that you shape, and then you can stack multiple pieces. For pieces that are harder to balance is to use one of these. So let's get to enameling. First off, I'm going to take 2 sheets from a magazine. So one thing to remember about enameling is you're going to do one color at a time. You don't want to mix your colors. These are in 2 separate jars. You don't want them to get mixed up with each other because that's called contaminating your enamel. You need to think that these are small flecks of glass, so if they are mixed into another, it's going to create kind of a pixelated with the colors they're mixed with. And what you're looking for is that you have a smooth, solid, one color, so no contamination. So first I'm going to start with this color, this blue. I have my enamel, my sifter, and I'm going to apply this squeegee oil here with a little paintbrush. A little goes a long way for this, so you just don't need much. All I need is that, because it's a flat sheet, it's a flat piece, I just need for the enamel to hold into place and not slip around. I'm going to close this up because I also don't want enamel to get into any of this. Now, when sifting enamel, you always want to be wearing protection. You want to wear a mask or a respirator and eye protection, because essentially you're shaking this glass and it becomes airborne, and you do not want to breathe that in. For the sake of doing this class though, I'm not going to put a mask on, but I always wear a mask when sifting enamels. I put a little bit of the enamel into the sifter, and as you can see, it comes out pretty easily from this. It's kind of similar to powdered sugar when you're sifting on powdered sugar onto your pancakes. I personally hold my piece because it gives me more leverage, but I think when you're first starting out, just lay your piece onto your magazine so that you have more control over the enamel you're putting on. So what I'm going to be doing is covering the surface so that it's evenly dispersed over the piece. And I'm just tapping the sides. Okay, how do I pick this piece up? What I'll do is, I have here like a palette knife. So I'm just going to shimmy that under the piece so I can get it into my hands. So I don't want to put on a huge amount of enamel, but you just want it to be even coat. So I have the piece on the trivet. It's going to go on this wire mesh. I just want to make sure that I find a place where it's balanced really well. And before I do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and clean up my space. This is what I'm talking about, is that you don't want to leave enamel out and you risk that it gets dirty, or you are going to mix your other colors into it. Always keep your workspace super tidy and neat because you just don't want to ruin an entire jar of enamel by getting another color into it. So I just tap this out of the sifter. And because I have two sheets, I'm going to lift up the one sheet, the first top sheet, and I'm just going to pour this back into its little jar. And as you can see, there is still residue on here of the enamel. So I'm never going to use this sheet when I'm using a different color. I will always tear out new sheets from the magazine. So I close my jar. I'm going to fold this piece of paper up 2 times. And I'm going to keep this color on top of this paper as I use it again. And I'll know that the blue is on this magazine. And I'm going to put it to the side. And so now I have a clean area ready for a next color if that's what I want. But for now, I'm going to go and put this into the kiln. Okay, so this is the kiln that I use. It's a Paragon. It's a great jewelry kiln. This does plug into a regular outlet, and I set it for 1500 degrees. For the most part, for what I do is I just time my work. So it's about 2 minutes into the kiln at 1500 degrees, helps the enamel melt down over the metal. So I have here, it's called a kiln fork, and I use this to leverage the piece from the wire mesh. I open the door, put the piece in, close the door, and I do this as swiftly as possible so I don't lose a lot of heat from the kiln. This is what I talk about when I'm saying to balance your piece flat, is because you're doing this type of movement and you don't want to have anything faltering so that that piece slides off into your kiln. It's really hard to get out. So you really want to make sure that you feel secure and steady about moving your piece around like this. I immediately look at the clock on my wall and I see the number, it's on 2. So now I'm going to time it for 2 minutes. What am I looking for those 2 minutes? Well, there's different processes that the enamel goes through. First, when you put it in, it will become sugar coat. It is fusing to the metal, but it has a really kind of like sugary texture. And then the next texture that it takes on is what's called orange peel. So it has exactly what you would imagine. It looks a little bit glossy like an orange, but it has that bit of a ripple. But what I'm looking for is that it has a smooth surface. That's generally the texture that I'm looking for. Now the first layer of enamel that you put on, generally it's a little bit hard for it to get a perfectly smooth texture. It takes about 2 layers and you'll really see the difference. So I've taken it out of the kiln after about 2 minutes. It still has a bit of an orange peel texture, and that's okay because once I add the second layer, it will smooth out. But I'm just going to let this piece cool there. If I want to remove it from the trivet to put it on a piece of steel block or onto this tile, it will cool down a bit faster. I can just use a pair of tweezers, kind of lift it off, and then just place it down on a flat surface. Okay, so I have my piece here. I have applied the first layer of essentially counter enamel. It does have kind of a texture of this orange peel, and that's totally normal for just the first layer. That'll even out as we do the second layer. The back has oxidized a little bit, which is normal when it goes into that type of heat. So I'm not going to do anything to it right now. I'm just going to go ahead and put that second layer of counter enamel onto this enamel. So it's the exact same process. This is it over and over. Once you learn how to sift, you can just apply it in all kinds of ways. I have this piece of newspaper that I knew that I used this same color blue on. I'm going to reuse that piece. I have my holding agent here. I'm just going to reapply that onto this side of the enamel. I am going to close up that holding agent. I put a little bit of enamel into the sifter. And for this time, I'm going to hold it as I told you I do, and I'm just going to sift it into place. Again, just a consistent amount of enamel. And then I'm going to place it onto the trivet and then put it into the kiln. Hi, Rick. Say hi to everybody. This is a studio assistant, Ricky. Well, we have 2 studio assistants. This one, say hi. This is Tito. These are twin brothers. Very sweet. No, sit. Probably best to get your dogs out of the way for the kiln, so I'm going to make them move over here. Come here. Tito, here. Sit. Good boy. Piece into the kiln. I look up at my clock. 8. So I know in 2 minutes I will take it out of the kiln. It's a good idea if you are a multitasker that you can set the alarm on your phone or something, but you just want to do not forget your piece in the kiln. So I'm going to clean up my area because I'm probably done using the blue, but you never know, so I'm not going to throw that away yet. But same thing, I Put the blue back into its jar. Close the lid. Close the pages. And I'm all set with that blue for now. Now what I need to do is clean out my sifter, and the way that I do that is you can either just bang it onto the table, not around your area, preferably on the side of your chair or something, and just kind of take your finger out and clean it out like that. The other option is to find at office supply stores things that are dusters, so you can just blow it out like that, and you have a clean sifter ready for a new color. Two minutes have gone by. I take my piece out. Okay, so I have the piece that has 2 layers. It looks really nice, but the back is oxidized. So just because I'm doing another color, I need to clean that off. So I'm just I pop it in the pickle. You can sand it, just whatever you can do just to get it back to a clean surface of metal. Okay, so we have our piece enameled 2 layers on one side, and now we just do this process again 2 times with a different color on the other side. So again, 2 pieces of magazine, a little of the holding agent painted on, close that bottle, a little bit of enamel into your sifter, and I'm just going to tap it around an even coat. I'm going to lift this piece up into my hand, and I also want to detail something else that I failed to mention earlier, is that if you do have pierced parts in your piece, this hole up here, you want to make sure that's cleared out before you put it into the kiln, because you can enamel these holes closed. And a good way to do that is have maybe a broken saw blade around or anything. If that does close up with enamel when you have just sifted on there, let me see if I can hold this in a different way so that you can see better. You would just push something through there, clear it out so that that doesn't enamel over. So now I'm going to put it back on the trivet and into the kiln. Okay, so we have done this first layer on one side, and now I'm going to do the second layer, and then it should be complete after that. So let's get at it now. We're almost there. Okay, so that's it. We have kiln fired enameled our piece 2 times on the front, 2 times on the back. It looks beautiful. It's a glassy surface. The color's so vibrant, it's never going to dull. It's always going to stay this color. Now I'm going to assemble this piece, and what I have here is a Rolo chain 18 inches with a Lobster clasp. It comes from Halstead just like this, so it's perfect and easy to go ahead and create a piece from. I have the bail here, and it's just one that you can open and close to this hole, and it's going to even hide the hole so you won't even see that there, so it'll be just an element of the piece. Is so nice. So I'm just going to open this up a little bit. I don't want to nick the outside, so just give it a little bit of open with some pliers. And I'm going to squeeze this on, and then I'll do the same to close it up. So they're touching, and there's movement. And now I'm just going to use, you can use any chain, footage chain, and put your own clasp on, or you can get a chain just like this that's ready to go. And I've left enough room with the hole to link it in here. Great, and there you go. You have an awesome enamel pendant. All right, what do you think? Well, thanks for joining me here. I hope you picked up some tips for enameling, or you have totally learned a new skill. Again, my name is Laura Fortune, and you can find me on Instagram at Laura Fortune Studio, same on Facebook, and my website, laurafortune.com. Thanks so much for joining me.